Hello and welcome back to Library of Ruina Ranked. In this video, we'll be talking about Tiphereth's Abnormality. This floor is one of our first all-in strategies, so let's get right into it. In Tier 1, our F tier page is Despair. This page makes it so that whenever an ally dies, all other allies gain 1 to 3 strength and haste, and all enemies get 2 fragile. I'm not a big fan of this page since it's so situational, requiring your librarians to die to do anything. Of course, the effect is quite strong when it does trigger, but not worth nearly enough to justify sacrificing a librarian for it. I guess since this page is a -2, then you're more likely to have a librarian low on health, but it's still too narrow to make it out of F tier. In D tier, we have Hate. This page gives a buff to a single ally that makes it so that whenever they lose a clash, they take 2 to 4 stagger damage and gain 1 strength next scene up to 2 times per scene, and after losing a 3rd clash, it reduces the cost of the most expensive page in hands by 1. You won't be winning every clash, and you usually plan to lose some clashes when you absorb a strong die with the block die of a light regen or something anyway. There is a bit of a non-bow since gaining dice power makes it harder to lose clashes, but I wouldn't worry about that too much. Our C tier page is Justice. This page gives a buff to a single ally that marks the enemy who dealt the most damage to allies last scene, and they deal 3 to 5 extra damage to the marked enemy. This is a reasonable damage page against bosses. It's quite a bit worse than Yusa's request, being not reusable, not recovering stagger resist, and not being able to choose a target, but it's a consistent upside, so it gets to C tier. I put Blade Wedded by Teardrops in B tier. This page gives a buff to a single ally that makes it so that when they land a pierce attack, if it rolled max value, it deals 10% of the target's max HP as damage with a max of 12 and excluding mass attacks. This page is a pretty great boss killer, especially when paired with Frontal Assault or Grisly Grass, being light regen pages with a pierce die with range 2, giving fairly consistent triggers. Aside from that, you'll sometimes get a random damage boost when casting your generic pages, and the damage given by this page is a bit more consistent than Justice, so it gets the nod over it. In A tier, we have Blessing. This page gives a buff to a single ally that makes it so that if they took damage from attacks on the previous scene, their resistance of the damage type they took the most of becomes endured for the scene, applying independently for physical and stagger damage. This is the exact wording of the All for Hana passive, and is pretty good at making a librarian hard to kill. Going from a normal to endured has the damage you take, which is very potent, and it's adaptable to different damage types. Finally, in S tier, we have Love. This page gives a buff to a single ally that makes it so that whenever they win a clash with an offensive die, a random ally recovers 2 to 5 HP, and whenever they win a clash with a defensive die, a random ally recovers 2 to 4 stagger resist. This is a very strong recovery passive, easily recovering more than 12 HP and 4 stagger each scene, and can be adjusted to recover more HP or stagger depending on what's needed at the time or in deck building. This is probably one of my top 3 recovery pages in the game, and the S ranking reflects that. Moving on to tier 2 pages, in F tier I put Wrath. This page gives an effect to a single librarian that gives them 2 strength, 2 light recovery, and 2 page draw each turn, with the downside of them becoming uncontrollable and targeting random characters, including allies. This page is somewhat similar to Netzach's Fervent Adoration, but instead of the targeting upside with buff downside, it's a targeting downside with a buff upside. Losing control of your librarians is incredibly damaging, and the strength boosted pages are almost as likely to be leveled at your own librarians as they are enemies, so it's not worth taking unless you're building towards Nyx. Our D tier page is Magical Girls. This page gives a buff to a single librarian that marks the combat page with the highest cost that is lower than 4. After losing 4 clashes with the marked page, the librarian gets 5 protection each scene and becomes immune to status ailments for the rest of the reception, as well as inflicting 1 erosion and fragile 1 hit, but only twice each scene. Requiring you to lose 4 clashes with your most expensive page is pretty annoying, as usually that page is supposed to be pretty much anything you throw at it, and so you need to be playing against an enemy that has a page with a strong 1 or 2 to get it, which will take at least 4 scenes usually. The trigger effect is quite strong, but defensively slanted, which is kind of annoying. Since this page is a -2, you're more likely to be losing when you take it, and while defensive pages are usually stronger here, needing to lose more clashes might end up killing your librarian before you can trigger it. I put Intemperance in C tier. This page gives a buff to a single librarian that gives them effect that makes them destroy all dice on an opponent's page at a 25% chance when they win the first clash of a combat page. This is a pretty strong utility, if not a little inconsistent. This will usually just guarantee you get damage in sometimes. It has some application in trying to mitigate pages with a weak 1 and a strong 2, although its inconsistency makes it not ideal. Additionally, breaking dice also removes opportunities to get emotion coins, which can be painful, although it's less of an issue when you're at emo 3 or 4. In B tier, we have Road to Happiness. This page gives a buff to a single ally that gives them 1 endurance for each clash win next scene, with a max of 3 per scene. Winning clashes is trivial, so this is basically 3 endurance every scene. That's pretty powerful on defensive decks, but it not being strength makes it profoundly mediocre for most decks, which limits its rating somewhat. But in defensive focused decks, it's just incredible. Our A tier page is Companion. This page gives a buff to a single librarian that makes it such that when there's no companion present, the first enemy they hit is marked as companion, and when the selected librarian defeats the companion, all the librarians restore 3 light and recover 10 HP and stagger. Since you get to choose who you mark, you can just hit the weakest enemy and get your 15 light pretty easily, which lets you nuke down another enemy and get a positive feedback loop where you'll outvalue your opponents with bomb pages. The downside is that the page doesn't do anything if enemies don't die, so sometimes it can be a bit awkward if there aren't any enemies who are low, but it's not a super huge deal as you need to kill enemies to win anyways. In S tier, we have Greed. This page gives a buff to a single librarian that makes it so that when they're in a clash, if the winner's roll is 4 or more higher than the loser's, the winner recovers 2 to 5 HP and deals 3 to 7 bonus damage to the loser, noting that both the librarian and their opponent can trigger the effect. This is definitely a greedy page, making you want to dominate your opponent's pages. It requires a bit of playing around, but can easily give you 30 damage and 18 HP a scene with minimal effort. That level of sustain and damage gives it the nod over the somewhat inconsistent Companion. Moving on to tier 3, I put Void in C tier. This page gives a card, All Returns to the Void, to the hands of a single librarian. This page is a 3-cost single-use page rolling 1 to 10 evade, and on combat start, it exhausts all pages in the user's hand and gives them strength and endurance equal to the number of pages exhausted this way every scene. The joke of this page is that you can exhaust a bunch of your pages to get strength while keeping a set of 3 pages that you can loop each scene with 6 strength and endurance, such as Repressed Flesh with the City Grazed to Grass. And that's pretty cool, but takes quite a bit of setting up, and the result isn't incredible, giving you a very one-dimensional librarian. The other consideration is to just exhaust a couple of pages for value, but again, that has setup costs and the juice isn't worth the squeeze. Next, I put Nyx in B tier. This might be a bit controversial, but I think Nyx is kind of bad. This page gives a buff to a single librarian that inflicts 5 Feeble, Disarm, and Bind to all other characters, as well as making Greed, Hate, and Wrath lose their drawbacks, but only works if the librarian also possesses Hate, Despair, Greed, and Wrath. This effect is obviously extremely strong, but requires you to take 3 of the worst pages you can take in this floor in my opinion, and it doesn't even automatically win the fight for you when you do assemble it like Netsack's Spring Genesis does. This is purely a for fun setup because the pages are all -1 or -2s, so you need to set up your entire floor to accommodate it, and it's just worse than playing standard. Finally, I begrudgingly put Acidic Sludge in S tier. This page simply inflicts 5 erosion to all enemies, and gives enemies with erosion bind equal to the amount of erosion they have. Erosion is an incredible damage amp, acting like a Vuln, Stagger Vuln, and Burn all in one, and the bind helps you close out a reception alongside it, but it doesn't really provide anything else. It gets the nod as S tier due to the other tier 3 pages being pretty useless, but if this was on pretty much any other floor, it would be rated much lower. Overall, Tiphereth's tier 3 pages are pretty awful, and while her other pages have some spice in them, there's nothing that knocks my socks off as it were. I ranked her floor 8th in my floor ratings because of this. In the next video, we'll be talking about all of Gebra's abnormalities. I'll see you soon, and as always, thank you for watching.